I still remember the exact time my world collapsed, 3:17 p.m. on a Thursday. The moment was so small it almost slipped past me, a simple click on a school database. I'd logged in to double-check the new emergency contact system for my daughter's school. A routine thing. A harmless task. But betrayal doesn't always announce itself with screams or tears. Sometimes it arrives with a blinking cursor. I was sitting in my home office, two monitors glowing softly in the late afternoon light, rain tapping the windows like an impatient knock. My 12-year-old daughter, Sophie, had just yelled from upstairs asking about her science folder. I told her to check her backpack, still thinking about the last item on the screen. Under Emergency Contacts, there was a field titled Second Father. Not stepfather. Not guardian. Not alternate pickup. Second Father. The name next to it, Lucas Grant. A man I'd never met in my life. At first, I assumed it was a software glitch. I've been in cybersecurity for 15 years. I've seen databases go haywire from bad code or user error. But this wasn't that. The profile was complete. Photo ID, driver's license, signature records, medical authorization. All authorized. All validated. All pointing to him, not me. Lucas Grant was listed as having full pickup rights, medical consent authority, even conference participation. It said he'd been involved in Sophie's life for over 2 years. 2 years. I felt the breath catch in my lungs. My hands moved automatically, diving deeper. I traced the login history, scanned authorization timestamps, opened internal logs. Each layer peeled back revealed another betrayal. My wife's email. Her user account. Logged entries. Confirmations. All leading back to her. And to him. I called upstairs again. Sophie, I said as evenly as I could, who's Lucas Grant? There was no answer. Just the sound of footsteps, hurried, nervous, and then the soft slam of her bedroom door. That silence hit harder than a confession. I knew then this wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. A long, careful, calculated replacement. Of me. The moment my daughter slammed her door shut, I stopped being a husband. I stopped being a father in the eyes of the law. I stopped being a man with a family. I became a machine. In cybersecurity, the breach is never where you expect it, not the flashy backdoor, not the obvious weakness. It's hidden in the routine. In what you trust. In what you ignore. That's how Lucas Grant got in. And Caroline let him. It took less than an hour for me to compile enough digital evidence to make a federal agent sweat. Every timestamp, every IP address, every GPS ping from Caroline's phone when she claimed to be at a late meeting all pointed to one quiet truth. They weren't having an affair. They were building a life inside of mine. Lucas had been picking Sophie up from school for nearly a year. That STEM mentorship program I signed off on without question? It was real, but he ran it. The lab Sophie raved about in her essays? His. The new father figure her guidance counselor referenced in a school report? Him again. Quietly inserted through Caroline's accounts, her digital permissions, her fingerprints on everything. But the most violent discovery came in the form of a DNA test. One I never authorized. I was deep in encrypted school medical records, tracing back Lucas' presence when I found the request. It had come 3 years ago, labeled under a routine genetic anomaly screen. But that wasn't what it was. The lab didn't even offer routine screening. It specialized in paternity clarification. The requesting party? Lucas Grant. Approved by? Caroline. The result? 99.98% paternal match Grant, Lucas. No mention of me. No request from me. No notification ever sent to me. I stared at the screen, blinking hard. Not from disbelief, no, not anymore, but because my body had forgotten how to react. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't even blink normally. It wasn't the DNA result that stunned me. It was the method. The quiet elegance of the betrayal. They'd rewritten my daughter's bloodline and filed the paperwork to prove it. Caroline came home at 6:12 p.m., heels clicking on the marble like a metronome of arrogance. Sophie was upstairs practicing piano. I waited in the kitchen, laptop open, screen filled with documents. When she walked in, I didn't raise my voice. Didn't accuse. Didn't scream. Just asked, when were you going to tell me? She froze. Her smile, the one I once fell in love with, vanished like vapor. Tell you what? I turned the laptop toward her. The school profile. Lucas's full parental permissions. The DNA results. The timestamps. Her approval stamps. The photo of him and Sophie, his girl, at the fair. Caroline didn't sit. She didn't speak. She simply stared. I'm not stupid, I said, voice low, barely a whisper. I've spent my life hunting for digital threats. Encryptions, breaches, corporate spies. I never once thought to check my own home. She leaned against the counter like someone preparing for impact. Say it, I told her. Say his name. Lucas. How long? Her voice came colder than mine. 4 years. The silence was volcanic. It didn't explode. It just boiled beneath everything. You met him at that tech summit in Seattle, didn't you? I asked. The one I missed. Because of that breach audit. She nodded. You were in Singapore, securing someone else's future while ignoring ours. I stood up slowly. So you handed ours to him? Caroline straightened. Lucas noticed things. He saw potential in Sophie. He gave her opportunities. You gave her structure but no heart. You were a system. He was the person she needed. And what about me? I asked. Was I just a firewall you left running in the background? She didn't answer. Didn't need to. That's when I realized this wasn't an affair. It was a hostile takeover. Later that night, I watched from the upstairs window as Lucas pulled into our driveway. His car gleamed. His suit was sharp. He stepped out with the confidence of a man who thought he had already won. Sophie ran to him like a magnet, smiling, bright, alive. My name wasn't even mentioned. And in that moment, something inside me hardened permanently. Not rage, not grief, resolve. I wasn't going to scream in court. Wasn't going to grovel or bargain or play the victim. I was going to do what I did best. Trace, plan, infiltrate, execute. They built their fantasy on lies. I was going to rip it apart, piece by piece, because I wasn't obsolete. I was the ghost in their system, and I had just found the back door. It started with a single message. I need a meeting. Discreet. I'll make it worth your while. I sent it from a burner account routed through 4 proxies to someone who owed me a favor, Clint Weaver, the only man in my life who had seen me fight both corporate sabotage and divorce proceedings, and knew I was more dangerous when I was quiet. We met 2 nights later in a private bar tucked under a law firm downtown. No cameras, no windows, just whiskey and secrets. He stared at the files I laid out on the table between us. School logs, forged parental permissions, access lists from Lucas Grant's biotech labs, Caroline's digital fingerprints on every authorization request. And at the center of it all, the falsified DNA test. Jesus, Clint muttered, jaw tightening. How long has this been going on? For years, I said. But the extraction began 3 years ago. Quietly, one signature at a time. You think they're trying to take full custody? They already did, I said, tapping the medical records. They've been feeding the school and medical systems lies. Lucas was declared Sophie's father by lab documentation. I'm being erased. He leaned back slowly. And now you want to fight? I shook my head. I want to destroy. Phase 1 began that night. My first move was to map their network. Not just emotionally, but digitally. I didn't just want to prove Lucas was lying. I wanted to bury him in his own data. Lucas Grant's biotech empire looked clean on the surface. But once I traced the hosting structure behind his lab servers, the cracks started showing. Shell companies, diversion accounts, payments routed through Latvia, Singapore, and the Cayman Islands. Private lab ownerships hidden behind investment firms. One of them connected directly to Genesis Labs, the clinic that issued Sophie's fraudulent test. Genesis had only one client on file for that month. Lucas. Phase 2 was personal. I contacted Kayla Watkins, the director of compliance at Genesis, anonymously. One of your paternity cases from 3 years ago was forged. If you want to avoid federal inquiry, send me your internal test logs from July 15th, 20XX. You'll find discrepancies. You've been compromised. The files arrived less than 24 hours later. There was no father-child test on that date. The test that Caroline presented to the school, doctor, and lawyers never existed in the lab's real logs. They'd used a fake document, designed to look real, routed through Lucas's company's internal lab, not an independent medical institution. He hadn't just replaced me. He'd used his own lab to declare himself Sophie's biological father. Illegal, unethical, traceable, and I had it all. Phase 3 was leverage. I met with a woman named Flora Hammond, a financial auditor who'd once testified in a case I helped win for a data breach involving encrypted payroll manipulation. She'd been fired from Lucas's company a year ago. No reason given. No public scandal. But a sealed lawsuit was on record, harassment and financial retaliation. I found her, and I gave her what she never had, a weapon. I slid the flash drive across the cafe table. That's his financial architecture. I need you to burn it to the ground. She didn't even ask who I was. She just smiled and said, it's about time. While Flora began tracking embezzlement and I traced the falsified paternity, I started crafting a new image of myself, a broken man. The perfect decoy. I missed 2 meetings at work. Let my appearance slip. Ignored emails. Let rumors circulate. To Caroline and Lucas, I looked like a man unraveling. But I wasn't. I was repositioning myself as unpredictable, weak, legally unstable, a man easy to finish off. They wouldn't see the strike until the blade was already inside. It was a parent-teacher meeting that triggered the next move. Sophie's school had invited guardians to discuss the spring science project presentations. I RSVP'd anonymously. I wasn't expected. That was the point. The auditorium was warm and loud, kids presenting dioramas and experiments, parents milling around sipping bad coffee and pretending to care about pH levels and solar panels. I stood at the back, still, unnoticed, invisible, just how I wanted it. Then I saw her. Caroline. Hairpinned, silk scarf, heels too sharp for a school gym. She was talking to Lucas, who stood beside Sophie at her poster presentation titled, Gene Editing and Ethical Frontiers. A project he likely helped design. Their posture screamed parental pride. Lucas reached down, fixed Sophie's collar. Caroline rested her hand on his arm. They had rehearsed this choreography. I stepped forward. Their smiles collapsed the moment they saw me. Caroline blinked, the twitch of a woman calculating her next move. Lucas tensed, subtly placing himself between me and Sophie. Sophie's eyes widened. Dad? Not Lucas. Not other dad. Dad. The word hit like a storm. I knelt beside her. This is brilliant work, sweetheart, I said, voice calm, steady, unthreatening. Your conclusions on mitochondrial applications are incredibly mature. Lucas tried to interrupt. Ethan, this isn't. I stood, face inches from his. Your turn will come. I promise. He looked at me, confused by my calm, unnerved by the lack of anger. Then I turned to Caroline and spoke just loud enough for her to hear. Tell him the lab test was fake. Tell him the lab was yours. Her face drained of color. I smiled and added, I hope your lawyer is well rested. I met with Erin Blanche, a legal analyst I had once worked with on a digital rights case. She now worked for a boutique firm that specialized in custody fraud and judicial manipulation. The moment she saw the files I brought, particularly the lab ownership documents, her eyebrows arched. You're telling me the opposing party fabricated a paternity test through a privately owned lab and submitted it to a public school and pediatric office? Exactly. With no court order? None. She exhaled sharply. That's not just unethical. That's criminal. It's identity fraud, medical malpractice, and potentially perjury if it touched family court. It did, I said, handing over another flash drive. School affidavits. Caroline's signed authorizations. Lucas's digital signature trail. She closed the file slowly. You don't want custody, do you? I want my daughter, I replied, but not through screaming matches. I want truth. Then consequences. Erin leaned back. You're not suing for custody. I shook my head. I'm setting fire to their credibility and everything they built on it. Flora delivered first. 3 weeks after I passed her the drive, she called me at 3:42 a.m. Her voice was steady but sharp. He's been using company funds to pay for Sophie's private schooling, transportation, and the so-called science program. It all routes through nonprofit educational shell firms. Illegal under biotech corporate law. How provable? We traced signatures, routing patterns, document metadata. It's clean. Can we leak it? Already did. SEC got an anonymous tip last night. This morning, their office in Boston will receive full transaction logs. I smiled in the dark. Good. Also, she hesitated. I spoke to someone inside the PR department at his firm. They're quietly panicking. That was music to me. Lucas had built a house of glass. I had just thrown the first stone. The story broke 3 days later on a niche corporate ethics blog. Exclusive biotech CEO under SEC review for educational fund diversion and conflict of interest, anonymous whistleblower cites lab misconduct. Within hours, Lucas's company issued a statement calling the claim baseless. But the market didn't believe them. Stock dipped 4.6% in a single afternoon. And that was only the beginning. That night, I received a text from Caroline. You need to stop this. You're hurting Sophie. She's confused. She's scared. Please. For a moment, I stared at it. My hand almost typed something, anything. But then I remembered the forged paternity test. The stolen years. The orchestrated removal. And I deleted the message without replying. Let them feel the static. The glitch in their perfect simulation. Let them wonder how far I was willing to go. They wanted me gone. They made me a ghost. But they forgot. Ghosts don't need doors. Lucas Grant was still giving interviews the week everything began to fall apart. He smiled, perfectly composed, on business podcasts and leadership panels. He spoke in that calm, patronizing tone of tech elite, like the world owed him admiration just for being clever. He even mentioned Sophie casually as his inspiration for youth-centered biotech development. He really thought he was untouchable. That illusion ended on a Tuesday morning, 9:01 a.m., when the SEC froze 3 of his shell accounts. I watched the live feed from a secure laptop while sipping coffee. The press hadn't caught on yet, but the markets had. His company's stock began a sharp, steady descent. A quiet panic was blooming behind his well-dressed walls. Meanwhile, Flora had leaked selected parts of his lab's internal communications to a well-known whistleblower journalist. One quote made it into the first article. "We can't use a real test. The kid won't match. Get something clean, use our lab." The journalist didn't reveal the child's name. But Lucas knew. And so did Caroline. She showed up at my door that night. Not texting. Not calling. She knocked, 3 slow, nervous taps like someone approaching a tomb. I opened the door without a word. She looked smaller than I remembered. The blazer she wore was creased at the collar, her mascara a little uneven. "I need to talk to you," she said quietly. I let her in. She didn't walk far. Just stood inside the hallway, her eyes flicking from the staircase to the kitchen like she wasn't sure if this was still her home. "It was supposed to be clean," she said finally. "Quiet. You weren't supposed to get hurt." I laughed once, a dry, empty sound. "You rewrote my daughter's paternity record, Caroline. You forged an identity. You erased me." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't flinch. "You don't understand," she said. "You were always working, Ethan. Always somewhere else. You'd come home but never really be home. Lucas, he was present. He helped with her science. Her future. So you replaced me," I said flatly. "But instead of leaving, you staged a slow coup." She didn't deny it. Instead, she whispered, "Is it true that you're the one leaking all this?" "Not leaking," I corrected. "Revealing." She stepped back like I'd slapped her. "Sophie's going to hate me," she said. "No," I replied, "Sophie's going to know the truth. What she does with it will be her decision. Not yours. Not mine." Caroline nodded, slowly, as if aging in real time. Then she left, no drama, no begging. Just silence. The silence of someone who knew the ground was gone beneath her feet. Lucas Grant was arrested on stage. It was a tech symposium in Chicago full of investors, cameras, keynote screens. He just started speaking about data integrity in modern medical research when 2 federal agents stepped out from the wings and approached the podium. Someone in the crowd started filming. Lucas tried to smile. Then the agent pulled out the warrant. Fraud. Misuse of funds. Falsified medical documentation. Possession of fabricated lab records used to alter parental custody. Lucas didn't smile after that. The footage went viral within hours. His board resigned. His investors vanished. By midnight, every corporate tie he'd built unraveled like cheap thread. The man who tried to steal my daughter's identity was now just a disgraced mugshot on a breaking news banner. I didn't celebrate. I went to Sophie's school the next morning, waited outside the art building, and watched her walk out, backpack slung low, hair in a loose braid. She looked older. Stronger. She saw me and walked over slowly. "I saw the news," she said. "I figured you might." She hesitated. "Was it all true? About the tests, the fake lab stuff?" "Yes." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I didn't want revenge," I said. "I wanted you to choose with your eyes open." Sophie looked down, biting her lip. Then she stepped forward and hugged me. Not like a child. Not like someone needing comfort. But like someone saying, "I see you now. And I remember who you are." Caroline lost her legal rights to decision-making that week. The judge called the situation an orchestrated fraud of parental authority. Her visitation was limited. Her name would never again appear as sole guardian. She didn't fight it. Lucas pled guilty to avoid further charges. His empire dissolved. his name erased from the very spaces where he tried to write himself over mine. Sophie stayed with me. Not because a court said so, but because she wanted to.